Hello. So the other day we had this photograph of some stars, and I needed to figure out like where these stars actually were. The image came from this PDF here. It says, the location of the star-like object, and it shows this little circle here. Now, if you zoom in on this image and crop it, you get this image here, which isn't, super good, but you can actually see a whole bunch of stars. Now, the person who took this image has drawn this constellation on, which supposedly looks like Ursa Minor, but it isn't Ursa Minor. So what I did was I took this image. Now, if you zoom in, you can see that there are actually stars visible. I took this image and I removed the lines over there. Now, I did that without removing any stars, so it's all exactly the same. And I just brightened it up a bit so you can see the stars a little bit better. And then I kind of went through each of the stars that are visible, and I stuck just a brighter spot on them so I could see the shape of things a bit better. And you can see we've got some fairly distinctive features. There's like kind of a little box of stars here. There's one very bright star here, which is the star in question. Then there's two little stars next to each other right here, and then some more over here. And then I basically went into the Stellarium program, and I found where these stars are. Here's the two little stars there, and here's the bright star here, Antares, and a couple of other bright stars, and this little line of stars and a star down here. And you can see I can go between the two, and you can see everything matches. All the stars are in the same place. So this, obviously is what we are looking at. We're looking at the star Antares, and we can go back to the original image here, and we can see everything matches up. If you look carefully, you see these four stars here, these two over here, and then go back into Stellarium. There's those four and those two there. So everything lines up. But the question I got from a few people was, how do you actually do this? How do you actually go into Stellarium, which is this astronomy program, very useful, and find stars based on just this crappy little photograph that we have? I'm going to explain how I actually did that and some other options. Now, when you're looking for stars, there's a number of things to keep in mind. Obviously, when you look up at the sky, there are some things that are fairly recognizable. You've got the Big Dipper. Everyone knows where that is. You look towards the north, and you'll see the Big Dipper going around Polaris. There's Orion's Belt, which is three stars in a line, very, very noticeable. And there's a few other things like that that a lot of people will recognize. But in this image, there was nothing that was recognizable. He kind of tried to force this shape onto there, but it was wrong. And part of the reason is that this is zoomed in. It's a small region of the sky. It's not like the big picture of the sky that we're used to seeing, and it doesn't actually have any recognizable constellations in it. It's just got a few bits of other constellations you might actually recognize, but even if you did, there's not enough of it. Now, we can use Stellarium to look at the sky, but there's a number of complications that we need to be aware of before we start doing this. First of all is that stars move. Stars do not appear at a fixed point in the sky other than the North Star. All the other stars rotate. They appear to rotate around it. They appear to rise in the east and set in the west. So they move across the sky, and so they'll rotate in their orientation as well. With stars, constellations that rise in one orientation will rotate and end up setting in the other orientation. So if you look at the Big Dipper, you see it doesn't always point the same way up. It depends. And it varies throughout the day, throughout the night, rather. And it also varies with different times of the year, because we're moving relative to the sun, so the stars that we see during the night are different in different times of the year. So you need to know both the time of the day and the time of the year. There's also issues of light pollution. We can't see all of the stars. So if we bring up a star chart, it can have all these stars in it, and we might only be able to see a few of them, like the brightest stars that are in the sky with the light pollution. Sometimes there's clouds and other obstructions that cover up the stars, and we have to be aware that we're working with limited data. Like here, there's a tree down here, which is could have covered up some useful stars, probably didn't. And then finally, there is the issue of planets. Now, planets like Venus and Jupiter and Mars, the ones that you most commonly see, they kind of look like stars. They're very bright, but they move around. in a different way. They're in different positions relative to the stars. And so that varies greatly, a little bit through the day, but quite a lot depending on which day of the year it is. And not even just the day of the year, it varies based on the year length of the planet itself. So it's you need to know, if you suspect you're looking at a planet, you need to know the exact date. I use Stellarium to find this, and I'll get into how I did that in a minute. But there are actually other options which are easier if they work for you. One of those options is the site Astrometrynet, and that is this very useful site. You go to nova.astrometry.net/upload, and it lets you upload a file. So figure 1, you can just drop it in and you can upload it. And if you're lucky, you will actually get a result. And in this case, we actually did. I was quite surprised because I've used this site several times before, and it didn't actually give me a good result. This is using the cleaned up version that I created, but it actually works with the original image with the lines drawn on it, and it does actually find which stars we're looking at and what direction we're looking at. And so this is a little bit of a fiddly site to use. It takes quite a long time. Sometimes you get the errors when you're uploading it. You just have to keep refreshing the page, but it will actually give you a result. And here's the actual result. Takes a long time. It's rather slow. It was actually quicker, I think, for me to do it manually than to use this program. But I think it's a great option. If you want to try this first, it's probably the easiest thing to do. Might not work, but if it does, gives you the result. So here is the result. It looks a bit of a mess, but if you click on, let's see, full size, it gives you a better version of this image. And here's the result. We can see that the bright star here is Antares, and we're in Scorpio, and it basically tells you what we're looking at. And here's the original image. It shows you the stars that match, and that's it. So you can actually just take that and then go into Stellarium and just type in the name of the star, Antares, and it'll show you what it is. And just to show you, this works with the original image as well. You see here is the original image with no enhancements whatsoever, and they found the star. So I was quite surprised that worked as well as it did. I didn't use this. What I did was I did it manually. I went into Stellarium and did it manually. So let's have a look at what that actually entails. So here's Stellarium. Stellarium is a program for looking at the night sky. And you can kind of scroll around by just grabbing with the mouse, and you can zoom in on various different parts of the sky. And you can tell which direction you're looking in. Here we're looking towards the west. We know what time it is here, 2200 hours. It gives you the time in local time, which depends on where you are actually set. Now, the first thing you want to do is set the location. So you come over here to this little menu, pop-out menu on the bottom left. Click on location window, and you can just type in the location you want. And in this case, it's Albuquerque, but you can just type it in, Albuquerque, United States, and it will just set down here. It will set you to Albuquerque. We want to set the time and date. Now we know that this first image that we're looking at, figure 1, was taken on August the 1st of 2008. So we can go to 2008 and then August the 1st. So now we've got things set correctly to Albuquerque and August the 1st, 2008, and the time zone is UTC -6, which is mountain time, which I think is correct for Albuquerque. So we're all good. Now, often the times that people give for photographs are approximate. It's helpful if you can get the exact time from the image, but sometimes that's off by an hour because of daylight savings time and things like that. So be prepared to kind of mess around with this a little bit. Perhaps it's an hour later, perhaps it's an hour earlier. But in this case, we're going to go with 2208. I think is the time that it seemed to be. So let's leave that there. Now, how do we find what we're looking for? So here's the image. Something that you notice is we've got some bright stars and we've got some fairly dim stars, smaller stars. But we also have some, I guess you could call them mini constellations, where you've got things like squares. You've got a little pair of stars right here. You've got this two stars in a line there, two stars close together, two bright stars. And then you've got these little arc of stars like this, and then this kind of T-shaped cross over here. So you could just go around looking for those. But before you do that, there's a few things you might want to kind of set up in the settings. If you go to the sky and viewing options here, what I like to do is you can boost the size of the stars a bit, change their absolute scale, and you can see they're kind of getting bigger. You can see the stars a bit clearer, and it probably shows a lot better on the video too. So I'm going to boost that all the way up to 4, I think. I'm also going to limit the magnitude because we can't see all of the stars. Now you can do this in a couple of ways. You can do it with simulating light pollution, like over here. You can just turn up the light pollution and it'll turn off the stars. Or you can just limit the magnitude of the stars over here, and it will automatically remove the ones that you wouldn't be able to see if they're below a certain brightness. This kind of perhaps does it more. This actually makes the sky look lighter as well. So I kind of prefer to just leave this down and change the limit magnitude to a certain amount so we can see the stars more clearly. Something else you want to do is change the projection from stereographic, which is the default, to perspective. Perspective is basically what a camera would use, just a reasonable camera which uses rectilinear projection, meaning that straight lines remain straight. It's just a standard projection, and if you're taking pictures with your cell phone or a normal DSLR, it's probably going to be perspective projection. So if you want to get something that matches what you see without too much distortion or too different distortion, then use perspective projection. You can also go to the landscape settings and you can change what type of landscape we're on. Now, I like to use the ocean one because it gives you a nice clean horizon, but you can change it to various other ones and it will show things like trees and whatnot. But I think using the ocean one works well. Of course, we're in Albuquerque, which is nowhere near the ocean, so perhaps something else might be better. It doesn't really make too much difference here, but if you want to be able to see all the way down to horizon, you can use the ocean one. Okay, so here we have a very colorful sky, and we want to try to find this location. Oh, you can see I've got some stars, like Arcturus here, have labels on. This is something else that you can set here. You can go into the sky settings, and the labels here, you can adjust this slider so you can get more labels or less labels. I like to do it just so that the bright stars have labels on, so we just get a vague idea of where we are. So we were told we were looking towards the west, and I thought maybe it was this star Speaker down here, but you start to compare this. There's two stars, 1, 2, that kind of matches. That star matches that one matches that one, but then there's these 4 stars here. They don't really match, and there's no 2 stars over there, so no. So what I did basically was just start with this, just move around, looking for little pairs of stars. Like here's 2 stars next to each other, but what I'm looking for is 2 stars like this going up to the left, to the right at a 45-degree angle. So I just kind of kept looking around until I found 2 stars that did that, and it took a while, but eventually, there they were. I've actually turned the labels up too much, so I'm going to turn those down. You don't want to have too many labels because it obscures the stars. All right, so here we've found 2 stars. Now let's see how well they match. There's 2 stars, and there's a star, there's a star, there's another star. By George, I think we've got it. So of course I knew where this was, but this is basically the process I use. I looked around, picked the distinctive bits of this image, and basically just looked until I found something that matched. You see we're matching here, and of course all these stars down here, they all match, which means that these two stars here are the stars Antares, and this one's Antares, and this one here is Picaheli. I don't know why they use these weird names in Stellarium, but there you go. So we found it. We found the location, and we know now what we were looking at. That bright star in the sky is in fact the star Antares. Now, if we want to demonstrate this, the best way to do it is to take a screenshot. I like to leave the date and time on the screenshot. You want to make it so that the image is centered in the same position as the actual photograph. As you might notice, when you move things around, the kind of relative position of things changes if it's a bit to the left or the right, especially if you're in a wider angle. Not so much when you're zoomed in, but still, just to make it as accurate as possible, try to get it roughly the same size. Now, another thing you can do at this point is fine-tune the time. You see we have this star at the top, but that's the star next to it doesn't actually appear. If the time was a bit different, if we were a little bit later, you would see that star kind of pops into view. So it kind of shows you that if that star is right at the top, we need to be about this time, 10 past 10. Then once you got that screenshot, you can just take it into Photoshop or some other program that you can use to layer the images. I put the original image on the bottom layer, then on top of that I did the cleanup version. Let me show you real quick how I do that cleanup. In Photoshop, you can just use the spot healing brush tool, and then you just click on one end of the line, and then you shift click on the other end of the line, and just repeat that. Just be careful when you're going around the stars to not remove them. You see that star still there? That star is still there, more or less. You might want to use a slightly smaller brush. So that's all I did. Just remove the lines, and I can remove this line too. Then I adjusted the contrast, and that gave me this image here, where we can see the stars a little bit better. Then I went through them, as I said, and put the stars in, and then eventually took the image from Stellarium and just moved it around until it matched. You need to set the transparency to 50%, and you can move it around, and you can see it's readily apparent that everything matches up. And you can take out the enhanced versions and go back to the original, and you can see from moving around the Stellarium version that everything does actually match up. So there was another image as well, this one here, figure 3, zoomed in, which is an interesting image because it's showing this kind of bright light here with something coming off to the side, and perhaps something on this side as well. And it's not showing so many stars. There's 1, 2 brightish stars there, couple there, a nice couple, then some more over here. It was claimed that this was actually the same thing, but it actually obviously isn't, because these stars don't match up at all. So I had to kind of go back into Stellarium. I tossed this one into Astrometrynet, and it didn't come up with any results, so I had to be manual with this one. So back into Stellarium we go, and I was looking around, and I thought, what if it was Jupiter, a bright object? And you zoom in and you see, well, if you look at Jupiter in Stellarium, it actually has these little lines on it, and you can kind of see, it's like these are in fact the moons of Jupiter, which appear as tiny little bright lights, little light stars, but they're really the moons of Jupiter. And we can see, once we zoomed in on Jupiter, that we have these stars in the correct position. So for this image, here's Jupiter down here. There is 2 stars there and 2 little dim stars there, and then there's another star up there, which is going to be that one there. These ones are obscured by this chart here, but they would be visible. So it's Jupiter. Interesting though, it's not quite in the right position. If you compare this to this, I think we'd have to kind of zoom out a little bit more to make them match. So if you compare this to this Jupiter is actually closer to this star. So that kind of implies that Jupiter has moved, which means that we have the date wrong. So let's go and try adjust that. Now the way you adjust that for a planet is you click on the planet and then you select center on selected object, which you can also do by just pressing the space bar, and it'll move the screen so we're now centered on this object. And the good thing about that is that if you change the date, it stays centered on that object. So we have Jupiter and we have our 4 stars, just this is what it was in the previous day, day before that, and we can keep going back a few days until we get something that actually looks the same as in this image. And you see here we've got the 2 stars and then more straight down, and here's Jupiter with the moons of Jupiter sticking out the side. Now I'm not entirely sure about this. It doesn't look exactly right, but you can see obviously there's sufficient proof there with those 2 stars and those 2 stars and the fact that we have something that looks like Jupiter. So basically we're looking at Jupiter, and it's not actually very close to where we were looking with the other stars, which are, where are we, all the way over here, Antares and friends over here. So he took 2 photographs on different parts of the sky on different days and thought they were the same thing, and that they both showed that nothing was there, when in one photograph he had Antares and in the other photograph he had Jupiter and the moons of Jupiter. So there you go. I know Stellarium can be very intimidating, but ultimately all it is something that shows you what the sky looks like on a certain date. If you get past the simple navigation of being able to zoom in and out, knowing where the menus are, the location menu here, there's the time and date menu, and then the settings menu for the view settings, and being able to change the things like limiting the magnitude so we only see the bright stars, and changing the absolute scale of the stars so they're a bit more apparent. You don't have to do that. It shows a lot better on video, but I can actually see these stars fairly well, and I think if you actually have the correct size of the stars, it can be a little easier to actually see. So it's kind of up to you what you find to be better. And then changing the labels over here, very important, because you don't want it looking like this, because you won't be able to see anything. But it's also handy to have 1 or 2 labels just so you get a little anchor. And then changing from stereographic to perspective. And that's about it. If you like this video and you would like to see more like it, then please subscribe. Thank you.